Hello everyone. So, how many of you have heard of Next.js? Can you put up some messages in the comments? Like, have you heard of Next.js before? Can we have some comments or in the charts? Okay, Suraj says yes. Anyone else? All right. Has anyone worked before on Next.js? Anyone? Or you have not? You can say no also. You don't have to say yes always. All right. So we can move ahead. Like most of us have not worked on Next.js, so it's good to that we are starting and introducing some new things so we can implement those in future. So Sanket, can we move forward? All right. Starting with the overview, we'll be heading off with introduction, the key features of Next.js, the Next.js versus React.js, then the use cases that we have, and how do we install Next.js. And Sanket will be heading off with the implementation of the demo, benefits of Next.js. Then we'll see limitations of Next.js, and we'll conclude this session and we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So let's start with the introduction. So Next.js is a framework for building applications. So what does a framework mean? So framework is something which is opinionated and have some of the conventions that we have to follow as compared to React, which is just a JavaScript based UI library. So Next.js, we can build a user interfaces, feature and optimizations for our app. So as I said, we have to follow some of the conventions provided by the Next.js. Under the hood, Next.js also abstracts and automatically configure tooling for you, like bundling, compiling, and more. This allows us to focus on building your application instead of spending time upon tooling. So there are a lot of things that we have to configure in beforehand while we are setting up our projects. So whether it be server-side rendering, whether it be routing, we have to import a lot of libraries or configure a lot of things before we head off with a new project. So Next.js comes with a lot of features out of the box where we don't have to configure or tool a lot of things. So we'll head off with Next.js, which will help us build interactive and dynamic and fast web pages. So moving forward, let's start with the key features of Next.js. So we'll head off with server-side rendering, which short form for the acronym for SSR. So what is a server-side rendering? So basically, what server-side rendering involves is like generating the HTML markup on the server for each request. Whenever a user requests a page, the server executes a necessary code which fetches data and dynamically renders that HTML response before sending it to the client. So this is what actually happens at server-side rendering. This means that the server performs the rendering process on demand in real time for each request. So this is what the server-side rendering means. I also wanna share that the static site generation is something which is exactly similar to server-side rendering, but this actually happens at the time of build or a deployment. So this also involves generation of static HTML page, but it can be happen at the deployment time or at the build time. So Sanket, can you just share the source code of React app and the Next app? So this is when we inspect and view the source code of React app, we just get to see the root element. We don't get to see any dynamic component that we are including here. We are currently, I guess, on React app when we are having a default screen when we install, we are having some of the React images and every other elements, the text inputs and extra other components that we don't see here. But as compared to React, when we look at the source code of Next.js app, Sanket, can you just view the page source? Can you line wrap that? Okay, so whenever we inspect the source code for Next.js app, all of the code that is statically rendered or server-side rendered, it's already present when it is served to the client. So this also improves our SEO, that is search engine optimization, and also help to get our websites or pages indexed by the Google or any other search engine crawlers. So that was some of the key features, the server-side rendering and static side generation. Then next, we'll look into the file-based routing. So what does file-based routing uh, is? Okay, so file-based routing is like in React, we have React Router DOM for routing purposes. So in Next.js comes out of the the routing comes out of the box like in the form of file-based routing. So actually, to create a route, here we what actually happens is like whenever you install an Next.js app, we'll have a pages folder. So in that pages folder, you can create multiple files. So as of like you want to create an about page or some landing page. So to create a landing page, we have to have a root file. For example, localhost 3000 will be a root page. So in pages folder, you will have an index.js. So whenever you will head off to localhost 3000, that will be redirected to that index.js file. And whenever you want to have a about.js or a localhost 3000 slash about, you will have to create a folder within the pages folder, naming about folder. Then we'll have index.js file within that about folder. And whenever you will visit whenever you will visit the localhost slash about, you will be head off to that about folders index.js file. So here in image, you can see there's a dashboard folder. And along with that, it consists the layout.js, then settings folder within the dashboard folder and analytics folder. And both settings and analytics folder have pages.js within them. So whenever you will head off to whenever you will have head off to dashboard, the layout.js file will be rendered. And if you want to head off to settings, you'll just move to dashboard slash settings. So it will render the settings page within it. So this is how the file-based routing works. And you might also have some of the few questions like how do we manage authentication of routes? So you can have wrapper classes or wrapper components above your files or the main file. Like in this case, we have a dashboard. You can have a wrapper component for handling authentication. All right, moving forward, automatic code splitting. So what actually automatic code splitting is, like as we have seen that we are designing our application or structuring our application in a way that we are creating separate folders for each page. So usually what happens is like each page becomes an entry point into the application. So what actually code splitting means here is like whenever the code is splitted into bundles, which are the smaller chunks which are required by which are requested at each entry point. So for example, you are requesting for localhost slash about, so that is a different entry point into your application. So there will be a different bundle for that particular route. So it's just that we are splitting the whole application bundle into smaller chunks. So the each particular bundle is loaded whenever it is requested, and not the whole application is loaded at one go. You can compare this with lazy loading. Actually, in React.js, we just have to add lazy loading to divide our or load the application chunks separately, depending on the routes that we are requiring. So API-based routing, so it provides a simple and convenient way to handle server-side logic and expose APIs without the need to have a separate server, which is actually, it enables us a fully functioning backend that we can have at the front end side. So what does it provide? So it does provide us with the serverless functions. So what are the serverless functions? So serverless functions are the functions where we can handle incoming requests perform the server side logic or processing, and then return a response through which we can also communicate with databases and fetch data from them, and can serve or respond to our requesting files. You can create routes by so how do we actually create a API or have some API routes in FE side? So for that, you have to create a API folder within the pages folder. So in the API folder, you can have multiple files. For example, I want to get data of for example, let's consider type code or like the JSON placeholder. I want to display, fetch and display few of the person names. So I'll just have get a person's function or written over there. So I'll just head off to that slash person route, and I'll just get the data written from it. We can also have middlewares for validating and authorization purposes. And we can all in all have a serverless application here, which we can deploy in one go and not needing a separate server to maintain our backend processes. Then CSS in JS. This allows support styling using the CSS in JS libraries. For importing fonts, we usually go for Google Fonts, or some we have some of the fonts folder in our structure where we have all the files there. So in Next.js, we do have some of the features where we can also import some of the styled component libraries, where we can style specific components, div components, and we can export those. Along with that, we can have next/fonts, where we can have all the uh, fonts inbuilt, and we can get all the fonts. Actually, Next.js indirectly incorporates Google Fonts within it, so we can directly access those from Next.js library. Hot model replacement. This HMR, sorry, you already are experiencing and using in React.js. So this is nothing new, but is one of the few features of Next.js. So what actually hot model replacement is that whenever you're building application, you're constantly making some of the changes to the application, and you're constantly saving, and those changes are immediately reflected on the UI. So this is what actually hot replacement is. So you don't have to refresh the page again and again, and overall it makes our development process easier. So next topic, we'll look into Next.js versus React.js. So we have covered all of the features. Sanket, next. We have covered all the key features of Next.js. So now we have seen all the features. Let's compare those features with React.js. So let's start with framework. Next.js is a framework built on top of React.js, and React.js is a JavaScript library for building UIs. I guess this is pretty much clear for everyone. Let's start with server-side rendering. As I said, server-side rendering is something that you pre-built and you serve it to the client. So by default, the server-side rendering is by default provided by Next.js, and it is explicitly or implicitly implemented by Next.js. And in React.js, you have to explicitly configure it. Routing, as I said, React has page-based routing, and sorry, Next.js has page-based routing, and for React, we have to import some of the libraries like React Router DOM and configure them. Static site generation is something that comes out of the box in Next.js, and for React.js, we don't have any of such inbuilt capabilities. File-based routing, as I mentioned, we can create multiple routes using file-based routing. In this file-based routing, we can have a single one-go routing. We can have nested routing. We can have nested and dynamic routing. We can have all of the combination of those. Sanket will demonstrate those nested and dynamic routing, where there is a convention fixed by Next.js, where we have to follow some naming conventions while giving or naming the files, whether it be double squared and destructured params, where we have to create dynamic routes and etc. API routes, as I said, Next.js, we can have whole server in our FE side, so we don't have to configure another server. to handle backend tasks. And React.js, we can do those, but it does not have any inbuilt capabilities. We have to have some other configuration and tooling required for it. Automatic code splitting, as we are uh, structuring our application in such way that we don't have to uh, worry about the file structures and do code splitting. Each endpoint is a new entry point, and it gets loaded. The only that bundle gets loaded when it is required, and not the whole application. And for React.js, as I said, we have to follow lazy loading for that to implement, and we have to configure likewise. Performance optimization. What actually performance optimization is, like we have implemented pre-rendering, server-side rendering, automatic code splitting, that in turn results into a better performance in our applications. And React.js, for that we have, as like all of the points points to that we have to have some kind of configuration in React.js, and there are these features that comes out of the box in Next.js. The last point is like the ecosystem. The ecosystem is like the major key point here. As we have seen React.js, we have came across a lot of bugs, problems. There's a large community where we can refer to for in React. So that's why React has a lot of. It's been decades that React has been there, and a big community has been built upon. Well, Next.js is also a growing community of developers, and surely will grow more in future. Next, we'll head off to the use cases of Next.js and React.js. As I said, Next.js, where we will you implement Next.js, is like a single page application where we'll depend on the client side rendering and not on the server side rendering mostly, and is suitable where we have more control over the configuration and customization over the app, the folder structure we want to want by our needs and our customization we can have, and we can have multiple libraries that whatever we can have in here. It's like you have better control over your own application, and you don't have to follow some of the conventions that are provided by Next.js. And when we will use Next.js is well suited for server rendered applications where we want to have an enhanced performance, where we'll be benefited by the code splitting, server side rendering, and simplified routing. We don't, and we where we want to actually develop faster and for production ready environments. So let's start with like the Next.js. So how do we install Next.js? So prerequisites for Next.js is like basically you just want to know React and a React or any React or JavaScript, and you can start with the Next.js. Next.js, we can for to install Next.js, we need to have Node.js installed on our system, where we will be needing the npx command, which is provided by Next.js. So Node.js is required. Then after that, the document suggests that there are two installation types. The first one is automatic installation, which is recommended by Next.js, and the manual installation, where we have to install all the packages by ourselves, whether it be React Router DOM, React, React DOM, React, then Next.js itself, and other supporting libraries. So in this tech talk, we'll just focus on the automatic installation. So to start that, we need to have some kind of folder or a directory where we can navigate to and open a terminal, where we'll be having a directory. We'll navigate to the such directory and we'll open a terminal there, where we'll have to initiate a command to start initializing the Next.js project. Npx create a next app @latest, where before you are using for React CRA, create React app, here we have to use create next app. This will lead to some of the instructions we have to follow after executing this command. Like it will ask you to proceed if you want to. You'll have to type by for that. Then it will ask you for the project name. Here I have named Next.js demo. It will ask you to that you want to include TypeScript support for this project. You get to get choices for yes and no. I have configured no for now. It will also ask you for ESLint if you want to include Tailwind CSS. So as I said, it comes out of the box for the CSS supports. So it will ask you for Tailwind CSS, or you can go for any custom or other third-party libraries like MUI or Bootstrap, React Bootstrap, any other thing. It will also ask you for like the source directory where will be having our pages. So it also gives us option between using the pages based routing, or you can have your own uh, custom routing library, and other things that you have to follow. And then it will, after answering all of this question, it will initiate the project, and you'll have your project started. And Sanket, can you move with the demo after this?
Yes, sure. So thank you, Mo, for the features explanation. So for now, let me share my screen. So for this demo, we have created a normal application Next.js app. So as you can see on the screen, we have created an application which has many routes like home page, docs page, about page, post page, users page, and to-do page. So on users page, we have used a static site generation method, and on to-dos page, we are using server-side rendering. I will explain it in later in the VS Code itself. So by default, whenever we run the app, it will land on us on the home page itself, index.js page by default. So if you want, so if I refresh this page, as you can see, I am currently calling an API which is within our application itself, and it's displaying welcome everyone to the next demo of Next.js project. So next, we can navigate through a button, or if you want to navigate through any condition, we can navigate. So for navigating through a button, I will explain the code. If we click on it, we get navigated to the About Us page. So next, we have the Docs page. By default, this is the Docs page, but inside it, if we want to check a particular doc or a particular feature, so if we gets rerouted to a individual feature, we can enter it. So as you can see, it's getting rerouted to the viewing docs for the particular feature. So it will means it's a dynamic routing. I will explain in the VS Code part. So inside it, we can also have multiple routes like viewing doc one. Inside it, we have concept one, concept having concept three. So as you can see, viewing doc for feature one and concept three. So it will get rerouted to that particular component. Next, we have an post page which where we can have multiple posts, and we if you want to redirect to a particular post, we can redirect to this particular post which is having the component here. So inside it, if we want to view and have an review, check whether is a particular review, so we can reroute to the this part. Sorry for this. Actually, it's not. Yeah. So it will get redirect to the review part itself. And this is the static site generation and dynamic server side rendering.